Hey guys, this is my video on the topic of existence and life. So, this isn't written down, so there's going to be things I inevitably forget that I wanted to mention or whatever. So, it's not going to be, like an essay, but I will have some points I want to touch on at least, so I'll just write those down now. Actually, we'll just do it like this. So, what do I even mean by existence and life? So, it's probably different topics, but they do overlap a little. So, one is like where how do I wind up with the belief system or worldview that I have regarding like why things exist or whatever. That's one. And then the other one is life, consciousness, that sort of thing. So here's the gist. So as far as theism versus atheism, I lean towards theism. I wouldn't outright claim that I know for a fact that God exists. So in that sense, maybe it's more agnostic because technically that's what agnostic is supposed to be. It's supposed to be someone that just doesn't make a positive claim one way or the other. But you can have leanings, right? You can be an agnostic that if they had to guess, though, they would lean towards one or the other. But also, what's different with me in regards to being agnostic is that I still have religion. So that's also confusing to people because typically, if you have a religion, well, that means you're a theist, right? But if theist means someone that claims that God exists, for a certainty, well, then in that sense, I'm not atheist because, I mean, how can I claim for certain? I don't think anybody can. So maybe some people think they're certain or they're lying or whatever. But just for like clarity or, using words with the meanings that they have in that sense, I'm agnostic but lean towards if I had to guess, I would guess there is an intelligent creator. Now, if that means I'm theist in your mind, okay, well, then I'm theist. It's no skin off my back. It's just more so I don't claim that I know for a fact that there is a God. Whereas, like the average Christian would, right? And that's fine. I'm not saying they're bad or they're wrong. I'm just saying that's where we differ. So that's that. I'll get I'll get down to the like how I get to this point because there's a reason why I get to this point. Then there's also the nature of like consciousness and all these fallacies that you see people make all the time regarding it. One example is like the idea that you can transfer your consciousness to a computer and then become immortal. Or, cloning. Oh, you can be immortal by being cloned. When people say these things, it just shows that they don't even understand what their own consciousness is. They don't even understand their own. I'm assuming they have consciousness. Okay, so if you want to get technical, you want to get philosophical, sure, maybe they don't, and that explains the error that I'm going to be talking about. Sure, maybe they don't, but let's just assume that they do have consciousness. Well, they obviously don't even understand their own consciousness. If they think that they can be destroyed and then be rearranged again, like Star Trek teleportation or whatever. I've never watched Star Trek, but I know they have some kind of a machine or something where like it disassembles you and then recreates you somewhere else or something. And then people are like, oh, that actually just killed the guy and made a clone or whatever. Well, some people think that that means immortality, right? That if scientists can figure out cloning or can figure out how to reassemble your, your array of bits or whatever, your array of molecules, then that's still you. But obviously, it's not because, for one, we have such a thing as monozygotic twins. So those are people that have the exact same genes, right? Some people make that argument. They think, oh, that's the clone, right? So the people that think cloning means immortality, well, we already have cloning. It's called monozygotic twins. And that's when twins share all of their DNA. Their DNA is just like if they were a clone of one another. And obviously, you can see how that's not, that wouldn't lead to immortality because they're still different beings, right? They still have their own consciousness. Like one twin cannot experience the other one's experience, right? So that that means you can pretty much just get rid of the idea of cloning or rearranging bringing back your DNA or whatever. Your genes in the exact same configuration means that you're back. And that's actually a problem because for the materialist, meaning the person that thinks that your consciousness is solely a product of your physicality, they obviously haven't thought about stuff long enough because, for one, like I said, you have the monozygotic twins, which is the clone. And you can also imagine, right? You can imagine, like, let's say someone was about to die of cancer and they're terrified. And then someone says, oh, but don't worry, we got this machine that can reassemble your molecules or whatever. I mean, that wouldn't give them any relief unless they're dumb. But they would understand that that's not doing anything for them, for their vessel or their experience or whatever, however you want to describe their consciousness versus the consciousness of the clone or the consciousness of the rearranged atom clone elsewhere. So when people say these things, and there's so many variations of this fallacy, it just shows that people don't even understand what they themselves are. Not even understand, but that they haven't even noticed. They haven't even questioned that they exist or what it even means or how is it that they even exist. They haven't even thought about. They haven't even analyzed their own existence, like the consciousness aspect. Because obviously the physicality has its own discussions or whatever, but we're talking about the consciousness. And consciousness is weird because if you want to, let's say you're going down the atheist route, the evolution route, people argue that humans or whatever level of complex life starts having consciousness, whatever that may be, we will never know. Because as individually, we can only know that we ourselves are conscious. And then even if you don't want to be that strict with the philosophy of it, you can still reasonably assume, right, that like lesser life doesn't have consciousness. It's more just a mechanical response or reaction to what it does or whatever. Now, some people might say, oh, this reminds me of another point. The brain, okay? So some people might say, hey, man, how do you know that plants don't have consciousness or even rocks, man? Well, if we're defining consciousness as, our consciousness, awareness, we can assume pretty reliably that certain things that don't have brains don't, because we know that even we ourselves don't always have consciousness, right? When you get knocked out, you can get put into a state where you're not even dreaming, right? You don't have any thinking at all because your brain is damaged, right? Like your brain, whatever, is losing blood, or whatever it is that happens to the brain when it gets, when you get punched or whatever, you get knocked out. Whatever it is that's happening, we know it's in the brain. And we know that in certain conditions, you lose consciousness. Even when you go to sleep at night, you're not always, right? You go through different cycles. And some of the cycles, you're not thinking or aware of anything or dreaming or anything. You have no consciousness. And we know that's a result of something going on in the brain. So we know that you need a brain, right? Now, that doesn't mean that that's all you need. It doesn't mean that, well, the brain, that's a different conversation. But sticking back to the, like, hey man, how do you know, like, rocks don't have consciousness, man? Well, because we know that we ourselves don't even have consciousness all the time. Only under certain and strict conditions do we ourselves have consciousness, right? So we can assume that you need a brain to have consciousness because our consciousness is affected by our brain. If our brain gets damaged, we lose consciousness. Okay. That actually ties into another topic, which I'll probably just do another video on, which is the Christian notion of the eternal soul. Right? They think their awareness, which is what they call their soul or their spirit, which is another topic. They think that that's eternal, but we know it's not eternal because even while alive, it's not eternal. Even while you are alive, you're not eternally conscious. Well, anyway, so going back to the consciousness talk. Consciousness is weird because, going back to the atheist argument of consciousness arose, right, at some level of complexity, right? It might be like at lizards and above or whatever. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But at some point, they say that it evolved because it's useful, right? Like, if you touch fire and it's hot and it hurts, and you experience that it hurts, it makes you stay away from touching fire, right? If you eat salt and fat and it tastes good, then it encourages you to eat salt and fat, which you need to be alive. So that's a scientific argument for why we have consciousness and why it arose. But that's retarded because you don't need actual consciousness. You just need the behavior or a machine that can mimic consciousness in order to achieve the same things. You don't need the actual magic of consciousness. Right? You can make a machine and give it some way to measure temperature or whatever. And you can still have it. You can still make it like back away when you sense hot temperature. Or place the sugary, sweet, salty, fatty meat in your mouth and chew. You know, you can still have a machine that does these exact same behaviors. And you can still do it through the process of selection, right? You can still say, well, the things aren't alive or conscious, but it just so happens that some were more likely to stay away from fire than the others. So the ones that stayed away from fire are the ones that now exist, you know? So you can still have the exact same mechanism and the same outcome and the same benefits that they attribute to being the reason for why sentience arose without even having sentience. And I mean, you know this because you have animals that we can all safely assume don't have consciousness, and they still know to back away from the thing that's dangerous, go towards the thing that you need, So it's literally 100% retarded and super sloppy that's the best they can do, and they think they can just, they think case closed. It's it's been addressed. No, it has not. That might work on, masses of people, because most people will never think about these things, which is, I guess, another topic. Why are people bad at thinking? There's a good reason for it, I think. But that's another video. But anyway, it just shows you how bad people are when it comes to the concept of sentience, where one, you can tell they don't even understand their own sentience. They don't, like, the fact that they can think if they had a twin that would be them. It's retarded. I don't know what other word to use to describe that. And then even in the scientific community, like their explanation for why there is consciousness, I mean, they'll never be able to explain what it is or how it is. It's just impossible. One, it's just unlikely in like a technology sense, right? In a scientific understanding sense. But then there's also the philosophical aspect of, they would never be able to prove that anything that they make is conscious, even if it behaves as though it is, because you can just make a thing that behaves as though it's conscious, like AI. You can make a program if question equals what is your name, return John, and then you can say what is your name, and it'll say John, And obviously, you can understand how that doesn't prove it's conscious. So it would be the same thing, no matter how complex it is, with like the scientific community trying to tackle consciousness and like, oh look, we made a machine that's conscious. One, you probably cannot, and two, you would never be able to prove it. It's unfalsifiable by the nature of what consciousness is. That it's an experience, right? You cannot prove that anything else is experiencing anything. So lump that in with like the futurism fallacy. That is another topic, because there's so many examples of these kinds of fallacies, like these sci-fi type of beliefs where you can just tell they just haven't, either they're retarded or they're charlatans, basically. There's no other way. There's no in between. So that's one of them. One, consciousness doesn't make sense because it's not required for, evolutionarily. Two, even if it were required, how would evolution do magic? This consciousness isn't like changing the shape of your thumb. It's a paradigm shift going from no consciousness to having consciousness. Like, now we're attributing magic to evolution. They can just do anything. Let's say there was some giant asteroid hurtling towards Earth. No, even better. Even simpler. Let's say planet Earth was all lava. Now we're gonna just say, oh, well, evolution would make it so that things that can survive in lava can just live and exist. No, it cannot. Evolution isn't magic. Like, even if you're going to grant all of its premises of like, one, you magically start with a single-celled organism. Whatever the simplest life form is, you magically just start with that. Okay, let's grant that. And then it has random mutations, in the DNA. Okay, let's grant that. And some of them are eventually positive. Okay, let's grant that. Like, even if you grant every premise that it offers, you're not going to get an explanation for things developing consciousness. Like I said, it's not even required for survival. All you need is the same behavior that you would get from a thing that can feel, but it doesn't have to actually feel. It just has to react the same way as though it does. And that would have been good enough. And that would be doable under the model of selection. Like if you grant all of its premises, you can get that. You can get a thing that behaves a certain way. But you're not going to be able to explain getting consciousness. There was another segue on consciousness and evolution that I was going to cover while I was talking, but I didn't want to lose track of what I was talking about, so maybe it's just gone now. Anyway, imagine these kinds of things, but times 1,000, right? Like these fallacies. Anyway, going back to consciousness. So, you can break down the possible realities into a binary, right? And sure, it doesn't mean that they're, hey man, just 'cause it's a binary doesn't mean that they're equally likely. No, it doesn't mean that, okay? I'll grant you that. It doesn't mean that. But it's still a binary. So you can say, either existence was created by an intelligent being or it was not, right? That's you can agree that that's true. That dichotomy is true. Okay, so let's start with this binary. And then even you have subsets, right? We'll keep going down the chain. So under intelligent design, you can have like, all right, we'll do this. Like I can cover like, well, what, like simulation theory, right? Simulation theory is just like the Redditor kosher approved version of intelligent design. And it's actually a cope because it's just their way to deal with the fact that they think the universe is intelligently designed, but without attributing it to like Jesus or whatever, because they think that's the dichotomy, right? They think it's either they got to pick Jesus or nothing or an alien, or whatever version of simulation theory they subscribe to. But simulation theory doesn't actually solve anything, because if they're saying simulation theory but the creator is just another normal person, then they're still back where they were, right? They're still back to like that's not addressing what reality is, because now they're just saying there's a greater reality. Okay, well then you're still back at square one then. So I'm not even gonna deal with that right now. I'm just gonna what I will do though is this simple dichotomy. All right, sorry, I'm back. I'll just go ahead and throw in simulation theory just cause, even though it's not actually simulation theory is just it's a non-answer. It's a non-opinion, because if you have simulation theory, well, you still have to come back to one of these at the very top level, right? So, actually, I'm not going to include it because I already explained why. Like I said, simulation theory just gives the illusion of an answer, but it doesn't. It's just we're still back to this dichotomy behind it. But this is where a lot of people make the fallacy. They'll think, atheism, theism, and if it's theism, then Jesus. But it doesn't mean that. But here we can have another dichotomy. For simplicity's sake, I'll do these boxes are too small or my text is too large, whatever. God that is involved, and then God that is not. Right, so even if you subscribe to this thing here, then these are the next roads you can go down. And then I can explain like how I traverse this here. It might have to be another video, I don't know. We'll see how long this video gets. Well, anyway, so far this makes sense, right? And again, you can say, well, that's arbitrary because it gives the illusion that they're equal. No, nobody's saying that they're equally likely. It's just that this is a dichotomy, right? The reality has to be one of these two. And likewise, if you go down intelligent design, you can have a dichotomy that the designer is one that is involved or one that is not, right? Like the one that just made existence and then left it running on its own and that's it. Or one that like gave us rules or whatever. And here I'll cover where actually it doesn't even matter. We'll get to that. Hopefully, maybe this video. Well, anyway, so back to no intelligent design. So some of the problems with no intelligent design. Okay, so I know most of you have already heard like the Goldilocks arguments where like, oh, the universe magically coincidentally supports life. Right, and that's an argument someone that believes in intelligent design would make. Like, oh, what a coincidence that the universe supports life, because, you know, you could have easily, much more easily probably, had a universe that doesn't support life, right? A universe that's just entirely heat, for example. Or a universe that doesn't exist, right? It's easier to not even have a universe at all than to have a universe. Or a universe that vanishes, you know, in less than a millisecond and then regenerates and then vanishes in less than whatever. Like, if you were to write out all the possible universes and the possibility of no universe at all, which, you know, that's what you would expect. Like, to imagine for a second that you can continue existing as an outsider somehow, just pretend, and someone told you what's likely, you know, outside of you, that there's nothing else, that there is nothing in a vacuum called existence, or that there's an existence and it just has all this stuff in it, and things form and there's different shapes, and then there's these things called trees and life and whatever. Like, obviously it's simpler to assume that it makes more sense that there would just be nothing. And then you'd begin to wonder, wait, how do I even exist? Or whatever. Well, anyway, that's the first problem, is why is there even an existence at all? Which they try to have answers here that don't make sense, and I'll cover some of them. So one of them is, well, going back to the Goldilocks argument. So the counter to the Goldilocks argument is now, and it's so fucking cheap and pathetic, is, oh, there's the meta universe. So what it is there's just so many infinite universes, and most of them don't have life, because that's what you would expect, because you need a fine-tuned universe that can have life in it. So, you know, it would look like theism, you know, if there was one universe and it was fine-tuned for life. So we can't have that, you know. So let's just pull out of our ass the meta universe. Oh, that's our counter to the Goldilocks argument. So now they're arguing that, oh, there's just infinite universes and most of them don't sustain life. And this one just happens. we are in this one because obviously we would have to be in one that does sustain life, right? So the fact that we're in the one is not surprising, but that's their solution. That there's just so many. Well, that's you're still in the same problem because now all you've done is you've argued for a fine-tuned metaverse, right? The metaverse has to be fine-tuned for life still. Because even then, right, if the if the scientists can understand that it is suspicious if there's only one universe and it's fine-tuned, that's suspicious, you would think he'd be smart enough to understand that then it's still suspicious if the metaverse is fine-tuned for life. Which is an argument I've never heard anyone make. I don't know why these things are obvious. But I don't know why people don't make this argument. All they did was make the universe bigger with the metaverse argument. Right? It went from, yeah, that would be a little... First they tried to deny that it would be funny or suspicious, right? But then when they came up with metaverse, then they acknowledged that, yeah, it is. But what the reality is that there's just so many and the vast majority don't have life, which is them conceding that it would be very strange and serendipitous if there were one existence and it was fine-tuned for life. Well, guess what, idiot? You will never be able to prove a metaverse. It's unfalsifiable. Right? So this is the scientific attempt, but so far all we have are unfalsifiable claims. Like transferring your consciousness to a computer, which is unfalsifiable because all they can ever prove is that they figured out how to get a computer to react and respond and appear like you, appear to think. But because you cannot actually experience its experience, it's unfalsifiable. And likewise, universes outside our universe are unfalsifiable. And then again, even if they could prove the metaverse and that the metaverse is fine-tuned, well, you still have the problem of like, oh, how serendipitous that the metaverse is fine-tuned for life. It just seems obvious to me that if there were no intelligent design, it would make more sense for just nothing at all to ever exist. Or even if something must exist for reasons, then that they wouldn't just magically support life. Now, to address that, they'll go back to evolution, right? They'll say, well, with the magic of evolution, life can emerge. It doesn't even need fine-tuning. That's how evolution is. No, it needs fine-tuning. That's why you don't have life in lava. That's why it seems that all life needs oxygen. Right? Or even if they found like, oh, there's this other gas and we found some organism. Like, it's obvious that there are still rules and conditions that are required for life. And how fortunate that existence has those things. And how fortunate that even though it's not necessary and even though it doesn't have the capability, that evolution evolved consciousness that it doesn't even need to accomplish what it's accomplishing. It just needs to have a thing that behaves as though it's conscious without having to muster magic out of the air to achieve it. Okay, so that's some of the aspects of no intelligence versus intelligent design. So just off the bat, intuitively, things would just make more sense that as they are now, this makes more sense. And it's kind of conceded to by the fact that they have to come up with the metaverse explanation. And again, by doing so, it's not even a gotcha. All they did was make existence bigger and used to have an existence that's fine tuned for life. So they're back at square one. Now you might say, one of the counter arguments to intelligent design is, well, where did God come from? And I know you're familiar with the arguments of like, oh, by asking where God came from, that means you intuitively understand that things need origins, right? Things have to come from something. So where did all the matter come from? Oh, that's infinite. Okay, so then you're treating matter as the God that can create life or whatever. And it just exists just because. So either way, you have to believe that something in the beginning was just exists just cuz, right? So there's no escaping that. So if you're going to ask where did God come from, well, where did anything come from? So I mean, that's not an attack on either. They're tied on that front. And it just makes a little more sense, right? Like if you saw a computer laying, in the middle of the desert, it would just make a little more intuitive sense that it was intelligently made. Right? You could come up with all sorts of theories as to how it was not. But it would just be simpler and intuitive to think that it was made by someone. Someone meaning a conscious, intentional being. Well, the universe as it is a lot more complex than a computer laying, in the middle of a desert. Okay, I'm trying not to tangent out too much because then you can tangent out into like its own video, and I don't want to make multiple videos of the same topic. I just want like a generalized overlook of ideas concerning a particular topic. So with no intelligent design, it's recursive. You'll say simulation theory or whatever. Because at the very end of everything, you're saying no intelligent design behind it, right? That's what you ultimately mean. So you're trying to account for the fact that the universe seems like it's intelligently designed. So you say simulation theory. But what you mean is that behind that reality, like the ultimate reality, is no intelligent design. So it's kind of cheap and lazy. Because you're trying to have your cake and eat it too. You're granting that, yeah, it does look like the universe is designed. But still, no God, because I want to watch tranny porn or whatever, And then the other one that's recursive is like metaverse. Oh, well, metaverse still doesn't explain it. Just you're back to square one again because metaverse is still fine-tuned. Or whatever. So this one I think just ends here. God that is involved, God that is not. So here's another little thought. You have the ability to choose which one of these two you prefer. But that for sure is going to have to be another video on the utility of truth and facts, reason-based logic, empirical, free-thinking logic man garbage. Well, anyway, this more so is just a breakdown of like the different paths that are available for a worldview or explanation or whatever you want to call it. So no intelligent design has no explanation. The explanations they offer don't make sense even within their own realm. right? Like even just appealing to reason and science as they claim they are doing, you can point out that their claims are unreasonable and unscientific. They make unfalsifiable claims about, other universes, and give answers that are non-answers, like fine-tuned metaverse, whatever. This one's more intuitive. This one's more has more useful. And sure, intuitive doesn't mean true. Well, with all other things being equal, like it's into something being intuitively towards one way or another is something, right? It doesn't mean 100% it's sold. It's an argument in favor of, right? In case you don't know what intuition is your brain having some kind of a function where it takes other things it knows that and it factors those things in and comes up with some answer that you didn't consciously have to think through, but it's still a product of your brain and reason. Intuition doesn't just mean wrong, or an emotional feeling or whatever. Like a lot of people tend to think it necessarily means it doesn't. It's just a tool that your brain has to formulate opinions without you having to be consciously involved in the process. But it's still a process of your brain and your knowledge. So anyway, if you go down the intelligent design path, you can say, well, that doesn't necessarily mean Jesus. Yeah, you're right, it doesn't. I mean, even if you go down the God that is involved path, even if you go down the Bible is true path, it doesn't mean Jesus. But so a God that is not involved, the idea that God just created the universe and then left things alone. That one is probably the most intellectually honest one out of like all the possible paths that exist. This is like the things look like there's intelligent design, but I cannot say for sure, and thus I cannot make any positive claims where I'm going to go and try to compel people to agree with me or whatever. That's what this one is. So this is like the agnostic that leans towards intelligent design type thing. So religion is different, right? So like I can explain again, it might have to be another video, because I'm gonna just try to stick to the nature of existence and life, meaning consciousness in particular, and the different theories for how it arrived. No intelligence offers no actual answer. It offers things that don't make sense, and that's fine. Right? It could be the case that no intelligence is true, even if the people that promote it can't explain why it's true. That's possible. That is a thing. And likewise, intelligent design can have better sounding arguments and can be more intuitive, and it can still be factually wrong. That's true. That is a thing. But then there's also a thing of, does it matter? Right? Let's say someone can mathematically prove that there is no intelligent design and that you should eat dog poop. And then someone else says, no, I disagree with that guy. I think the universe was made by a giant kangaroo and you shouldn't eat that dog poop. Which one do you hope the guy listens to? Right? If you're being honest and you're not a psychopath, you're like, well, in that dichotomy, then it'd be better for the guy to believe the kangaroo guy so he doesn't eat the dog poop. So how about that one? How about that little turn of events? What if it doesn't matter which one is true? One is still superior to the other as a model for civilization. Now that doesn't mean that I don't think this one is true. I do think this one is the one that makes more sense for lots of reasons. But as an aside, I'm saying even if this one wasn't true in the long run, which you could never know, you can only know if this is true, you can only know that. Because if this is not true, you would never know. If that makes any sense. Right? If intelligent design is true, that can be known, right? An event can happen, right? The judgment day or whatever. Then you can know that this is true. But if this is not true, you would never even know that it's not. You cannot even know that this is not true. So this also has a one-up and is more resilient and more robust of a belief system than this, because this has the advantage of this can only be known to be true. If it's false, you would never be able to know that it's false. You can only ever know that it's true if it is true. If this one's true, you would never know either. This is the same thing. This one being true is the same thing as this one being false. So it BTFOs this in that sense also. It has so many advantages. It's OP actually. Well, anyway, this system is better. You can phrase this in different ways. You can say this one's better in the sense of like, it would be better if this one were true. Like if you can pick which one is true, you would pick this one because this one, well, one, immediately your life has purpose, right? You're loved. You were made by someone with intention. You're not just a mistake, a product of an accident. Depending on which path you go down here, you can go down a path where there's an afterlife even, right? So you get to be immortal. If you like being immortal, then you would have a preference for this one being true because this is the only one where you can have immortality. So this one is better in that sense, in that this one would be better if this one were true than this one would be if this one were true. If this is true, this is a less good reality for us than this one. Now, there are some paths you can draw out here, right? You go down God that is involved. You can say God gave book. Book just means requirements. It doesn't mean like a literal book. It just means that God has some kind of, he has some expectation of how we should live or whatever. Because you can go, and that's kind of the implication of God is involved, right? That's what I meant actually. But we'll say it's a subset of God is involved. And then from here you can, and I'm probably skipping some steps, but just to get to my point here, you can say God punishes bad people And then as a subset of that, because you can have that be true and still not have an eternal hell. But let's say one of the paths you can go down to is God sends bad to eternal hell. And even this has different paths. You can say you're part of a belief system where God only sends the absolute worst to hell, so you're not really concerned for yourself or your loved ones. Then you would still say that this universe, this reality is superior to this one, because this one you get to live with the people you care about forever. But most kinds of Christianity believe that the vast majority of people are going to hell. So I guess you can argue this one is worse than this one. Right? So out of all these paths and boxes, and there's many missing, but out of all these, you can find some that are worse. I would argue this being true is worse than this being true. But so far, every other box here is better than this one. So this one's superior, this one's superior, this one's superior, this one's superior. Like, we can, even at this point, we can still agree God punishing bad people, whatever that may be, is good if they're actually bad, whatever that may be. Right, so this system is, on the whole, looking superior. And so this is superior. This is better than this one in that sense. In that you would, if you were honest with yourself, you weren't like a Redditor or whatever, you would say, yeah, it'd be nice if this one were true. It's also, that's another point for its superiority in that sense. It's superior in that this can only ever be proven true. This can never be proven true. If this is false, you would never even know. This one is superior in... There was another point when I barely started going down the superiority angle. There was another way that this one was superior. Not in the angle of what you prefer. I guess it's kind of different, but superior in that it's what's best for the human organism. Whether you agree, whether you would choose it or not, it just factually is. Right, so the first superiority I mentioned recently was superior in that it's preferable to you. Like, you would pick this over this reality. But it's also superior in the sense that even if you disagreed, even if you personally went with this one is still factually, empirically superior for you as an organism. And you can see this just by looking at evolution, right? Every culture had religion in it. And things don't just happen for absolutely no reason, right? If there were no benefit to having religion, you wouldn't find them everywhere. You might find like one or two or whatever that developed it as a quirk or whatever, and you can come up with explanations as to whatever. But it wouldn't be found literally everywhere, literally every culture ever having religion. So the fact that they all do is a proof that it is beneficial, because if it was superior to not have religion, then the tribes that had no religion would outcompete the ones that did, and then they'd be more reproductively fit, and they would spread their genes. Right? That's how fitness works. That's how if something is good for you versus bad for you works. Right? Well, are you gonna disagree with evolution now? That's what evolution is. That's what selective pressures are. That's what fitness means. It means you have some trait or some behavior that is beneficial to you, meaning makes you spread your genes better. It makes the quality of your genes more fit for spreading its genes. So it's not just about making a million of you, it's making a million of you that can make their own and where they're still fit so that they'll still exist in 10,000 years. It's not just the immediate mass replication or reproduction. So every culture has religion, ergo it's good. Right? Because you can have not religion. So you might be able to find some kind of a trait that's not good that every culture had, and that's going to be because there's no other way around it. It's going to be just some kind of necessity of some other fact of reality. Right? It's not going to be something that they could have done without and then somehow they still had it, but it was bad for them and they all did it. That doesn't make any sense. So, evidence number one that this is superior empirically, regardless of your personal opinions. Every culture had it when they didn't need to. You can imagine a culture without religion, without a belief system of some god or some way they must live because some spirit or God wants them to live a certain way. Or even if they have a religion, which probably does exist, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to assume there's some cultures, some tribes somewhere that have religions that don't even necessarily guide their rules, right? Like all their religion is a belief of like there's these gods or the god or whatever, and they made the universe, or if they're more advanced, or they made us, or something. And even that alone already has a psychological benefit. But I'm going to assume that the majority of cultures had religions that also tied into like expectations of behavior. And that's probably why it's beneficial, because it gets people to behave certain ways that are more fit for civilization. And it gets people to cope better with their place in the universe. Like, even if that's what it was, it's still better. Even if that would still make this superior to this. So, like, imagine this was right, and you're trying to pwn this guy, but all you're doing is getting that guy to eat dog poop. Like, that's what you get. Like, oh, congratulations. You convinced your mom. You convinced your friend, and now they're eating dog poop. Like, that's a weird flex. But no, that's just one aspect. Like, that's saying even if this were false, it's still superior. But it's probably not false, if I had to wager. So anyway, some other thoughts on existence, consciousness, life, or whatever. So going down this one, or actually this next worldview I'm going to talk about, it doesn't even have to be one or the other. It can fit on either. It can be part of God that is not involved, or it can be part of no intelligent design or whatever. And that's just the idea of reincarnation, not in a religious sense, but just in if you existed once, why can't you exist again? Right? Regardless of which one of these is true. It is a fact that I exist and you exist. And regardless of how it is, right? Even if we can never know why or how, some way you exist, you do. So since those conditions, if you exist, then obviously the conditions for you existing also exist. So if there are conditions that allow you to exist, why can't you exist again? So I'll put this box off to the side because this one actually, well, I'll do this because this one is irrelevant to this one. And yeah, I know I can memorize the numbers here, but this is like my third time using this program. So this is probably another video, but that's depression, anxiety, existential dread, and those sorts of things. So when I was younger, I used to deal with existential dread. And it didn't matter if my opinion was no intelligent design or intelligent design. There was still the idea of I exist now, and it's possible that one day I'll die to never exist ever again, regardless of which one of these are true. And it was terrifying. And it got to the point where I accepted the possibility, and yes, it is possible. It's even now, right now, this is still on the cards of possible realities. Well, not this, but dying and just never existing ever again. But I accepted it, and then it doesn't bother me anymore, which will be another video because I know a lot of people deal with that, and I can help you explain my thinking that got me out of that trap of being scared of my own mortality and my non-existence. Well, anyway, but then after I beat it, I didn't come to this idea during it like as a cope. This was after I had already accepted, like, yeah, it's possible that I might never exist again. It occurred to me that, wait a minute, I exist now, so why can't I exist again regardless of how it is I exist, right? If I exist because God made me, well, then why can't he make me again? If I exist because there is no God and the universe just exists because reasons, and somehow in the universe I result, well, why can't I result again? So here is where you have, like, this ties into some religious beliefs, this ties into some atheist beliefs, right? Some atheists maybe believe that the universe cycles, right? The universe ends and then restarts and then they get to exist again. Or in religion and intelligent design, right? You have reincarnation. In reincarnation, there's different reincarnations where you can come back as anything. You can come back as a rock. You can come back as a praying mantis. Or there's some where the resurrection, you come back as yourself, like where you left off, like with all your prior memories or whatever. That's still reincarnation. And that's still you coming back to life or whatever. Well, anyway, so there's like different variations of this. If you exist, you can exist again. But just very plainly, like outside of having to think about how or why or anything, just very simply, you exist right now. So what is stopping you from existing again? Regardless of how long it would take. So then there are some issues with existing again, because existing again kind of sounds like the clone thing. Where, like, let's say, for example, what if you can exist again? And what if you existed again right now while you're still alive? Right? In some other planet, you exist again. Well, then again, you can see how that doesn't do anything for you, right? It's just like your monozygotic twin We're like, okay, it's me in some sense, like some physical sense, but it's not my. I'm not experiencing that. So what is of what use is that to me that I exist again right now in some other planet if I can't experience it? This one instance of experience I'm experiencing now is still the one and only ever that I will ever have. Right? So there's that problem of like, okay, there's some potion or some mix of chemicals or some circumstance where you can exist. Well, what if that circumstance happened right now while you're still alive on the moon? You can still understand how it's still confusing because your experience wouldn't transfer to the other you on the moon, you know. But if that guy on the moon were brought back after you died here, then you, for some reason, you can then feel like, oh, okay, then that is me because this me right now died. But rationally, it's no different than if the same problem still exists. That it's just another stamp, like another instance of you. But it's not you because you're still your one soul experience happening right now. So there's that problem. But then it still begs the question, right? If you exist and here you means your experience, your current instance experience of you, if that's what you means here, then why can't you exist again? And maybe you do, maybe you don't. maybe there are other yous already somewhere, but you don't get to experience it. So in that sense, it's still only one you. So one little idea, one little thing I've been tinkering with that kind of solves that dilemma is that the universe, and this is irrelevant of whether there is or isn't an intelligent design. This is just the nature that you exist. And the question of can you exist again, meaning you with the experiencer. So the solution to the clone on the moon and the monozygotic twin and all that is that there is something unique about your properties that are required for your particular experience to exist versus like a clone that has the same molecules or the same genes or whatever. And that is whatever it is, it might be tied to like your existence in space and time because your clone can never occupy the same time and space that you do. That's one trait or one aspect that they cannot clone. Right? That might be the determining factor as to why if they clone your body and, you know, you're born on the moon, why you cannot experience that. It's because you're not occupying that space over there. And it's tied to the space and time you are occupying. Because you got to admit that is the one obvious distinction between you and a thing that is atomically you somewhere else. That's the one change that's obvious. There may be others, but that's the obvious one. So let's say that is why you cannot be brought back on the moon or whatever. Well, then you still have the option of if God made you, well, then he's God and he can do anything and he can bring you back, you know, using God powers. But even if there is no intelligent design, we know there's a universe still. We know you exist somehow. We know you have a particular experience and, consciousness. And if it's tied to your place in time and space, well, there is a possible reality under no intelligent design where we briefly talked about it, where the universe cycles. We'll do this. I'll move this one up here. I'll delete that arrow. And we'll do this. And then under cycles, you can have another binary of the universe cycles exactly the same every time. And then one where it cycles randomly. And then underneath, this one would still go underneath both of these because even with RNG, you'll eventually get the same one. It just takes a lot longer. And it has some other undesirable side effects, which I'll get into. So if there is an intelligent design, you can still be brought back because it, whatever you want to call it, made you once. So why can't he bring you back again? Or even if you go down the the no intelligent design path, well, we know the universe exists. So either, let me add the third one here under. Okay, so if there's no intelligent design, and we know there's a universe, we know there's an existence, it must be one of these three. Either the existence exists once, and then it dies in a heat death or whatever, and that's it. Or it must be eternal, where it doesn't just end in a heat death, but things keep like shifting and changing and collapsing and expanding or whatever. And then there's one where it does end, but then it starts over, right? And then under this one, it can start over exactly the same every time, or it can start with RNG, and they're different. This one kind of sucks. This one might as well be this one here. These are tied. This one has two underneath it. One where God sends the vast majority of people to eternal hell, or just the absolute worst. They're both mathematically they're both equally bad because, mathematically, I believe if you were given a lotto ticket and one had a 1 in a million chance that you get tortured for eternity, and another one had a 1 in 2 chance you get tortured for eternity, they're mathematically the same because of the nature of the eternal, the threat of the eternal punishment. They are both eternally bad tickets to have. So this one is poo-poo, undesirable. And this RNG one is the same thing as, I think they're tied pretty much, basically. Maybe this one maybe beats the other one out because this one might not be possible to be eternal, right? So no matter how bad the RNG is, it cannot be worse than the other one just because this one, it may be the case that this one just cannot possibly be eternal, right? It might be the case that eternal universes just don't exist. Now it could, like there's, right, we can do another subset here, whatever. RNG can be eternal, or RNG, they're all finite or whatever. But this one's also bad. So with my theory of consciousness, I have to admit that there is a possibility that you do come back. Universe cycles, RNG, you do come back, but each time it's different. So if you're liking your life now, then RNG would suck because next time you might be born as, someone that's in tribal warfare on the losing side and you get captured and tortured. Or RNG means you might get aborted the next time around, right? If you so happen to have a mother that was considering abortion, that places you in danger with RNG. If it's exactly the same, well, congratulations, you didn't get aborted because you're alive. So you'll never be aborted. Right? So imagine universe cycles RNG and your mom was a shit lib and you, in this reality, you barely made it out. But like in 99 out of 100, you're just getting aborted. And that's your existence. You flicker into existence only to be stabbed apart by medical tools, and then you do that 90 times before you get to be born again. And then with RNG, it still sucks because even after you make it to birth, you're still susceptible to all sorts of things that didn't affect you this current time around. So this one sucks. It might be true. The fact that it sucks isn't an argument against it being possible or likely. I don't think it's likely for a few reasons. One, because I think, first of all, this one is more likely than this one by a lot, actually. And then second, even if you went down this path, I would say if there is no universe, there's no universe. If there is no intelligent design, a one-time universe seems very unlikely. And that's just because of the fact that you exist right now. Like, what are the odds that we are existing right now in the one little sliver? Right? You have a existence, and then this other line is non-existence forever or whatever. I'll do an 8 for infinity here. Right, so with one time where this is the only universe that's ever existed and will ever exist, and it ends with a heat death, and that's just how it is for eternity. So you have this. Well, this line is deceiving because this, in comparison to the length of this, which represents the eternal after the heat death, you wouldn't even be able to see this line because of how small it would actually be. But just follow along here. So under one-time universe, what are the odds that at any given moment we would be here on this infinite time lapse where the vast majority, in fact, virtually all of it is no life, right? It's after the heat death. What are the odds that this is true, but we're here right now? What are the odds that this didn't just already would have happened an eternity ago? 20 trillion years ago basically infinitely ago, this should have already taken place. And then we're just stuck here and then nothing ever happens ever again. What are the What is more likely, that we so happen to currently be in that sliver, or that this is just not true? So this one, I would say, by what this represents, this one just has to be dismissed as an option. If this were true, it's more likely that this would have already taken place than it's just taking place right now. Then there's the eternal one, where it's the same universe, but things keep changing, new planets, whatever, blah, blah. This one is probably fine. Like this one, I mean, nothing just pops up as like this one. Immediately you can see the problems with implications, like using reason or whatever. This one, nothing immediately jumps up. Maybe if I think about it more, it will have some issues. But point being, if we're going to go with the no intelligent design path, this one is probably the best contender. That at the end, the universe restarts. And so the Big Bang didn't just come from nowhere with magic. It's just part of a cycle. That makes a little more sense if we're going with this. So, going with this one, you have RNG are exactly the same. My guess, if I had to gamble on it and we're going with no intelligent design, I would say the universe recreates exactly the same every single time. It's hard to explain why. Like, part of it is intuition. The other part is a thought I've had, which is if you have the same conditions in the beginning, you should have the same output. Now, you can get into other things or whatever. Like, you can make arguments against this one. But if I had to guess, I would just go with this one versus this one. Because if we're going with this, then the universe is a machine, basically. So it needs to have some kind of a component that's predictable. And if it's predictable and it's like a machine, then it makes more sense that things cycle the same way. Another reasoning behind this is that if you do end with a heat death at the end, like you have starting conditions, right? You have the single point where the Big Bang originates from, and that's like the most compressed it can be. So then there must be one configuration that it can have if it's the most compressed that it can be. It must, like, if you were to take the universe right now and compress it, you had a machine that can compress it to the most compressed state that it can be. It should be the same one that it was in to begin with. And then the way it ends should also be predictable. And if the way it ends is predictable, then the way it compresses should be predictable. Now that itself can still fit some RNG in there somehow. But just looking at those traits, just exactly the same, just has a better ring to it. Another way, it doesn't matter, because either way, the point still stands that if the universe cycles at all, and the thing that makes you unique, and as far as like, how come if they clone me at the molecular level right now and put me on the moon, it doesn't do anything for me because my experience is still mine down here, this one. And it's tied to your time and place, then RNG or exactly the same can still facilitate you existing again, because you can be recreated in the same time and place in this state machine of the universe. Or even if there's an intelligent design, then you can still exist here. And in fact, I'm going back to this argument here of like how I can dismiss the one-time universe that has a tiny sliver of where there's life and then an eternity of nothingness. That's kind of how I dismiss anything outside of this, because you can replace this sliver of where life exists in the universe with this sliver of where you exist in consciousness. So you have to ask yourself, I exist right now. What are the odds? How likely is it that I am existing because I so happen to be in the one little tiny sliver of 70 years or whatever your life expectancy is going to be, compared to an eternity in both directions, before and after, where I don't exist and will never exist again? What are the odds that I would just, I'm just in that sliver, and that sliver hadn't just already occurred an eternity ago? Well, it's not likely at all. And in fact, I would argue that there's something about your consciousness that begs the question or implies that you must always exist. Meaning that it's not a coincidence at all, because that would be a huge coincidence, right? 70 years out of infinity, what are the odds that I would currently be in that sliver of 70? 0. So with that said, it might be the case that you always have to exist. And as soon as you die, your experience just goes back to the next time around. And of course, you're not going to remember it, because memory and all that stuff is tied to this particular instance of your brain composition. So I have a theory that if this is the reality we're in, this is the reasonable conclusion based off of things like your current consciousness and the necessity of your consciousness always existing, well, to you, right, from your perspective. Because the alternative is a coincidence so large that it's basically 0 out of infinity. And you're here, however it is that it came to be, you are here. So you'll probably be here again. You probably always will be here. Now that sucks for people that are born in the going back to the exactly the same thing. And I believe, again, if this were the reality, you live your existence the exact same way forever. And part of that, like, why can't you be like you're born as a dog next time? Well, because going back to what makes your consciousness yours versus your molecular clone on the moon, it may be your time and place in space. So if that is what it is, you can ever only be who you are right now. The dog is never in, the dog never has your molecular composition in the same time and space that you occupy during your conscious experience. So it necessitates that the same life is lived also. So that's one reason why I don't think if the universe cycles and it's the same, or if it's RNG but eventually you come back, why you would come back as a dog ever. Something else that kind of makes sense would be you exist, but then with some very, very tiny fluctuations, some very tiny differences. And that can be where maybe that ties into RNG, where there's like a billion versions of you that are that at some point in time do occupy the same point in space and time, but then they branch off into like slight differences where your shit lib mom aborts you or whatever. So if you have a mom that, like, not in a million years would she have been pro-abortion, then you're blessed. And if this is true here, because then you're pretty much safe. Assuming it's not exactly the same, because if it's exactly the same, then well, you're safe anyway. If you made it to a life. But if this is true, this also has horrific implications for people that had horrific outcomes, right? For the person that was born in the losing tribe and, got taken captive and tortured or whatever. Or the person that gets aborted for eternity by their shit lib mom. Which is another topic, like if this is true and we've allowed abortion to take place, then I don't know what to say about that. But anyway, so these are just some possible realities and how you can intuit them, how you can break them down into binaries so that there is you can cover the things you're covering. One of them must be true, like as you chain them down, right? This one or this one must by necessity be true. And if this one is true, this is a binary. You can create your own binaries. You can say the universe must or must not have a man named Joey Jojo Joey Joe Man in it. That binary would be true. But these are just some examples of binaries you can use in your logic tree or whatever. So anyway, just some thoughts on consciousness, on religion, on intelligent design, some of the coping fallacies from the no intelligent design side, some of the ways that intelligent design is vastly superior to. I didn't even really get into that. Like, I gave you some gists. Like, you see it everywhere, so by necessity it must be beneficial, or else you would not, right? The tribes without gods or whatever would lose. But no, you see every culture had gods and religion. So that's one proof that it's beneficial, even if you don't understand it. See, that's the beauty of what people call tradition. Tradition is just another word for evolution, selective pressure, genetic fitness, etc. It's just patterns that successful civilizations shared, right? Like the civilizations that wound up existing had in common. People call that tradition, right? Like mores or whatever. But in this case, the belief in God or gods, or just, but the belief in not this is robust and can be found everywhere. It can be found today in some untouched tribes that you interview. It's in all the cultures we know of. And yeah, I'm sure you can find some little tribe where like, oh, they didn't have any such thing. Yeah, but we're talking about, if I'm going to grant, I'm just assuming that that's true because there's always outliers, but I'm talking about general large trends that are replicable, right? Like, you're good luck trying to deny that's the case. I guess in another video I'll talk about how you can use what is called tradition, meaning patterns used by civilizations that were successful to like come up with mores, and how you don't even need to understand the rationale. That's the beauty of these patterns, right? So let's say, pretend for a minute that every single civilization on Earth developed a fear of not eating yellow flowers, right? Pretend. And let's say that it's 2025 and no one has found anything wrong with yellow flowers. So they don't know where that belief came from. You can still rest assured that there is a reason for that belief, even if we don't currently understand why. The fact that every single human being on earth came to the same conclusion about you should not eat yellow flowers is a proof, because an aversion to yellow flowers isn't a necessity, right? It isn't a byproduct of something else. It isn't like, oh, we know that avoidance of yellow flowers doesn't make sense, but it's actually a byproduct of this other thing. It's a byproduct of having hands for some reason, right? Pretend. And hands are beneficial, right? So you have hands, but having hands because blah, blah, blah necessitated having an aversion to eating yellow flowers. And so it's meaningless, right? It just comes from that. It comes from necessity because of something else that has a reason. Well, if you don't know that that's the case, right? If all you know is every single culture said don't eat yellow flowers, you can take it to the bank that you should not eat yellow flowers, even if it's 2025 and the person that's telling you not to eat flowers cannot explain to you why that you shouldn't. Just the fact that everyone came to the same conclusion, there's got to be a reason for it. And that's the beauty again. That's the beauty of history. That's the beauty of evolution. That's the beauty of patterns, that it does the thinking for you. See, if eating yellow flowers were harmful to you, you wouldn't even need someone that, that discovers why and then explains it to people. You wouldn't even need that to get the benefit. You would just slowly with time start seeing that cultures that for some reason or another have an aversion to eating yellow flowers, they're the ones that exist. That's how it works. You don't need logic and reason to have that benefit and that protection. So that's another topic. Implicit and explicit knowledge, and how they're both useful. You don't need to understand why. If there's a pattern that is successful, you don't need to understand why it is. And this pattern is successful. This one is new, but we can already see it's not successful. Like whenever someone is here and then they jump to this, it tends to be they tend to have negative outcomes. Like going from this to this tends to mean lower fertility rates, higher occurrence of mental illness, anxiety, pathological sexual behaviors, things like that, tattoos, blue hair, nose rings, you know the deal. And you might say, well, what's wrong with tattoos and nose rings and blue hair? It's probably not the things themselves that are wrong. It's just more so that they correspond and they're signals, right? The person is outwardly expressing that they have these other conditions, right? So when someone has blue hair and a nose ring and tattoos, they probably have a lower fertility rate, higher occurrence of mental illness, and they're signaling, like how some animals in nature will signal to you that they're poisonous because they're bright blue or bright red or whatever. So they're unintentionally doing that. So that's why those things matter, right? Someone that's like logic thinking facts man is like, explain using science why blue hair is bad. right? So that's why it's bad. It's because it corresponds. And that's all you need to know. You don't even need to understand beyond that. You just need to know, I don't know why it is that people with blue hair tend to have more mental illness, but they do. So yeah, jumping from here to here leads to more blue hair and nose rings and tattoos. And that's usually how it goes. It's very tricky to navigate going from here to here without falling into all of the traps, because it's possible. Like there believe it or not, there are people that are atheists and they still understand the why traditional values are useful and healthy in civilization, right? So that is possible, but it doesn't tend to go like that because people are not smart. Even people that are smart, are not necessarily people that think about stuff, right? Most people have not thought about stuff. Most people have not questioned things or thought about why things are the way they are. And that's fine. That's not a critique of people. There's probably a reason why people are like that. It's probably more stable to have a civilization where most people don't think, and then you just have a few people in charge of doing the thinking and then just telling them what to think. That's probably easier to manage and more functional than trying to have a civilization where everyone is a free thinking, objective logic, facts, reason man, or whatever. Well, anyway, with that said, because people are bad at thinking, when they get rid of their package that was telling them how to think, they don't become logic facts, man, and then realize that although there is no God, it's still, the traditional lifestyle is still a healthier lifestyle than this. They don't come to that conclusion. What they do is they just replace it with another religion. Religion just meaning a set of beliefs that they internalize, not because they thought about them, but just because it's, part of the package of beliefs that they have. So that's what happens, right? They go from here to here. Now they're like, I'm pro-abortion, pro-LGBT. I hate Trump. I'm pro-open borders. And it's not that they sat down. It's not that when they left here, they went into a cave and started fresh and came to these conclusions all on their own. No, they just adopted a different package of beliefs, aka religion. But this one is pathological and counterintuitive and destructive. So that's another thing that if you're considering navigating this path, it's going to be very rough. It's difficult. It can be done, but 99 out of 100 times you're just going to end up with lower fertility and be working against your own interest by adopting this alternative. Let me see if there's any other quick branches to touch on, or popular fallacies that people commit. Like I covered the Star Trek cloning or teleportation thing. Oh yeah, actually, yeah, very quickly. There is a possibility that all the experience that exists is the same experience, but you just don't feel it because it's happening somewhere else, right? So for example, going back to your clone, right? Let's say they clone you and they put you on the moon. They put your clone on the moon. It is possible that you guys both are in fact the same experience. It's just that one part of the experience cannot tell the other because it has to take place in your brain and your brains are separated. And you can actually deal with that with like a thought experiment of, if someone can dissect your brain and cut it in half, but in a way where it doesn't kill you, you can understand how it's still you, right? It's still your consciousness. But at that point, you wouldn't be able to feel like you would feel like it's two different people, right? Like one half of the brain would have its own existence and its own experience and its own feelings and whatever, and then the other half would have its own, and they would feel like they're different, but they're still the same. Whatever consciousness is, it's still the one consciousness. It's just been split, and one piece cannot experience the other piece because they're separated physically. So that's a possible reality as well. That all experience is one and the same, but it just doesn't feel like it because it's taking place inside the different the brains, and it's scattered. And so what that means is that you don't even need to be cloned. Like, you already do exist as the dog or whatever, but it doesn't feel like so because your particular subset of experience is happening in your brain that's listening to this right now, and not in the dog brain or the other human brain that's experiencing. And it's all one giant experience. Like, whatever sentience is, it might just be one sentience. That's one little thought about experience and consciousness. Another one is going back to the teleportation machine that destroys the person rather than actually teleport them. What it does, it kills them, and then it creates a brand new one that's not them anymore. Well, if that's the case, that might be what's going on every second that you exist, right? Because your atomical structure is constantly changing, probably millions or more than that times per millisecond. And it might be the case that every time it rearranges, that instance of you is killed, and then a brand new, completely different one is created in its place. But only ever the current version, the current alive clone, is the one that's alive. So it just continually feels like it's always alive, because only the alive one is alive in that particular instance. If that makes any sense. Anyway, those are just different thoughts, different possibilities that I've thought about, and just goes to show how little people have thought about existence. I mean, the people that say shallow things like, "Oh man, I can't wait till they can put my consciousness in the computer, and I can just orgasm forever. They can change my perception of time so that I can orgasm for 40 trillion years." Like, the fact that they think that's possible, I don't even know what to say to that. But yeah, just some ideas, just some thoughts on existence and life. And some of these tangents will probably just have their own videos. Hope you enjoyed some thoughts on existence and life.